everyone and welcome back to my channel. I have brought you my face today to talk about a recent show I watched called Cyberpunk Edgerunners. Edgerunners is a dystopian sci-fi based, I assume, somewhere in the USA where a 17-year-old boy from the underground is thrust into a dangerous ring of mercenaries after his mom dies. In short, this pitch has been told to us plenty of times before in animated media, but where Edgerunners seemed to have placed its special foot was in its art style. In fact, this is why I watched the show. Most of my colleagues, which were all in film and animation of some sort, were saying how this is a masterpiece, in fact comparing it to something like Arcane. And I am here in fact to let you know, in my opinion, this is very, very far from a masterpiece. So let's explain why the show is called Edgerunners. In the future, humans are able to fuse their bodies with extremely high-tech machinery or even replace entire limbs or organs, including hearts, lungs, livers, everything. So they can become mechanized. The drawback to this is that the more machinery you put into your body, the more you're likely to go absolutely insane. You're likely to lose your mind. And so that's why it's called Edgerunners. You're running on the edge of sanity. At least that is what I understood. So with that setup out of the way, let's get to our adorable male protagonist, David. Absolute law of screenwriting, we have to have a heartbreaking introduction to our protagonist so we care about his story. And what's a more cliche story than a boy from the poor parts of the city being bullied by his upper-class, bratty classmates? On top of that, his loving mom that works as a nurse to support his extremely expensive school in hopes of giving him a better future, dies in a tragic car accident. And now that we are deeply empathetic and care a lot about our protagonist David, we can get to the story. Don't get me wrong, this setup is a perfectly fine setup. Dead parents have always been used in media as a quick way to use empathy for a character. Hell, I've used it in my own scripts. What I'm trying to say is that this setup gives us nothing new under the sun. Following this tragic death, David is essentially not taken care of by the society he lives in, and in an attempt to fend on his own, he implants a highly dangerous, military-grade mech implant into his body. And to everyone's surprise, he can use it proficiently without going insane. And soon after is when he meets what I consider to be the entire appeal of this show, Lucy. Lucy is the person who brings David into the world of the mercs. They meet on a train where she's robbing people and then she betrays him and then they have a date and stuff. Overall, the story is fine. What I have a problem with Lucy is the way that she's used as a narrative tool. You see, Lucy to me falls into this particular and exact type of appeal that sci-fi shows have relied entirely upon before, which is the manic pixie dream girl, but hot, essentially the manic crazy hot girl. And I can think of no better example for this than a show like Darling in the Franxx, namely the character of THO. Darling in the Franxx, for those of you who don't know, is also a futuristic sci-fi show where a group of teens are operating highly specialized mechs and their similarly non-impressive protagonist is special because he can withstand the power of these mechs better than others, and so he makes the perfect partner for archetype special girl THO. And again, I went to watch Darling in the Franxx because of how popular it was in its early episodes. People were saying that this is the best show ever made. Very popular YouTubers like Mother's Basement raved about how good the early episodes are, so I went to check it out. And to my incredible disappointment, I couldn't even go past episode 14. It was an absolute mess of a show. I did not enjoy anything about this show, except for the said girl, THO. Because as you see, once the manic pixie girl is introduced into these narratives, they tend to become the center of a very clear-cut story. Our not particularly impressive protagonist, with his one special skill that allows him to even stand near her, will go on to commit extreme and atrocious acts of violence in a plot that becomes one-note, nonsensical, completely discombobulated mess of unnecessary violent acts with the implied end goal of protecting her. And do not be mistaken, live action shows and movies do not escape this trope. Not to mention that her design in typical anime sci-fi fashion is overly sexualized, which doesn't always bother me, but in this case, when you're actually drawing out the camel toe, it starts to irk me. Her design is nonsensical and completely unnecessarily sexy. It's not like shows where Kill la Kill tries to convince you that their designs make sense because of some certain power system, or even in Darling in the Franxx, where essentially she is wearing a full body suit. Nothing about the suit is particularly sexy, but the character design makes it so. I also have a general problem with the designs of the rest of the female cast, but somehow the scenarios in which their designs are used feel less of a problem. For example, Rebecca, which is my absolute favorite character in the show, she is so cute and fun. The first time we see her especially sexualized is when she's at home, which would make sense. She would walk around in her underwear at home, and when she's outside, she's wearing a big puffer jacket over that said underwear. The boss lady, she's kind of just rocking the naked titty, which, sure, at least I can understand it from a comfort level, but nothing about Lucy's design seems comfortable or practical. It is literally just sexy design for sexy sake. There is nothing about it that would make any sense, and the thing that bothers me about it is that it is what it is. It is a sexy design to satisfy the eyes of the male gaze, because this is a shonen, which is a show for boys. I just need to see titty. This show does have a couple of great character moments, despite what I was saying earlier. I think that the relationship between David and Lucy is amazing, and the fact that they actually acknowledge their romance is what I love. If you have been watching anime for a while, you will know the frustration that you feel when you have two characters that are clearly supposed to be a couple, but you're essentially forced to ship them because the show never acknowledges romance. But this being an American script, we do see them kiss on screen, and they do become a couple. The second great relationship in the show is between David and Maine. Maine being the leader of the Mercs, which eventually becomes like a father figure to David. Unfortunately, I didn't feel the emotional beats of when Maine was dying and David having the conflict within himself of going back and forth to save him. I think this falls into the unfortunate storytelling of logically I get it, but I don't think we had enough time to tell this story. You see, I genuinely thought that the show was gonna tell a different story. So from episode 2, when David implants the military-grade device into his spine and goes to school to beat up his bullies, the mega corporation running the school notices him and wants to use him as a protege military-grade tester. This to me was a very interesting plot point, and in many occasions the show did seem like that's where it will go, David joining the megacorp. That doesn't happen. They have this convoluted plan where they corner him into using their experimental military suit in order to escape them, where he eventually does go insane and dies in the end, which on its own as a development isn't bad, but how we got there to me was completely unnecessary. You understand the story, the show is perfectly competently made, but there's so many questions in my mind, like why are we even doing this? Why did Lucy not tell him what she saw? Why did he have to go fully mech? Just a lot of this seemed to me completely unnecessary. And not enough, like I would even go as far as to say that the corporations did not scheme enough to push him to where he went to. It honestly reminds me of the writing of the last season of Game of Thrones. In fact, that is exactly what I would equate it to, where the end isn't impossible, but it was far too rushed to get there. I think the nonsensical amount of violence towards the latter half of the show is very exemplary of a general irk I have with media directed at young boys and men. A quick example I can give is Solo Leveling, where I find that past the first arc, which is absolutely fantastic, but past the first arc, the show devolves into just complete and utter violence and death and killing for no real moral reason. But that is for another day. I think I can see a lot of similarities between Cyberpunk Edgerunners and Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans. And honestly, if you did like Edgerunners, go and watch Iron-Blooded Orphans. It feels like a very similar story, but if it had enough time to actually be told. Except the women in Iron-Blooded Orphans are far worse than in Edgerunners, but otherwise the story is much better. And with a runtime of close to 50 episodes, you really do get your fill. So in conclusion, Edgerunners to me had a lot of potential with great characters and good storytelling, but eventually lost itself in this trap of having the main protagonist be put into bigger and bigger violent situations, with the sole motivation being a manic dream pixie girl. If I can recommend shows with similar vibes that I find better, it would be Psycho Pass and of course the father of sci-fi anime, Akira. Psycho Pass has a far more intricate depiction of the postmodern hyper-technological society with a psychotic breakdown problem. And Akira has the crap ton of violence into it, but it all somehow makes sense at the end as immoral. All in all guys, I hope you enjoyed having a more structured video. Please leave a like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and I'll see y'all hopefully soon. Bye!